Take our Bibles and we'll turn to the book of Matthew. Book of Matthew in chapter 2. Today we're going to look at the final installment of the 12 Voices of Christmas. We've been doing this over the past several years for Christmas time, and we've looked at the majority of these. We're going to finish that today. Lord willing, we've seen the darkness and the heaviness that enveloped Israel during that 400 years where there was no communication from God. We've seen the oppression and the forced submission that they endured under the thumb of the Roman Empire. We've seen Herod, the petty and paranoid, but also powerful tyrant who served as the figurehead of that oppression. But then we saw that glimmer of hope, right, as the angel comes to Zacharias and Elizabeth. First communication in 400 years. Gabriel's visit to Mary continues that sense of excitement. We see the birth of John the Baptist, the forerunner, coming to prepare the way for the Messiah. We saw Joseph in his struggles with Mary's perceived infidelity, and then that dream from the angel that gave him reassurance and prompted him to go ahead and take Mary to be his wife. The difficult trip to Bethlehem, remember we talked about that. The birth of the Savior, so humble in nature that it went virtually unnoticed. Were it not for shepherds abiding in the field, keeping watch over their flock, and the angel announcement to them, the declaration of the glory of God. What a thought that was. I enjoyed that study earlier this year. Their response of worship, their joyful proclamation to everyone that would listen, that Jesus Christ is born. And then in Jerusalem later on, Simeon and Anna, two devout and we could say ancient Jews, believers, reveling in the birth of the long-awaited Messiah, publicly declaring their praise as they rejoiced in his birth. So that's what we've covered so far. Who's left? Well, it's pretty obvious this morning from what we've sung and what you see in your outline. The wise men, the Magi. I've asked Nathan if he would come and read for us a little vignette, the wise men, voices of adoration.
I'm a Babylonian. I belong to a caste of men who occupy positions of nobility, the most learned men of our country. I have dedicated my life to the study of the sciences, especially astrology. Powerful and very respected in my homeland, I have been sent as an ambassador and advisor to leaders in other countries. So, journeying to a distant land with some of my compatriots to visit a king did not in some ways feel unusual. On that trip to Judea, we visited two kings, one in a palace inlaid with mosaic floors, the other in a poor house with a packed earthen floor. To the first we paid our proper respect, but to the other we gave complete adoration. We came to find the one who had been born king of the Jews. You may wonder how we knew to expect such a birth. Long ago, during the days of Israel's captivity in Babylon, we first learned that a Messiah was coming. The wise men of Judah, Belteshazzar, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, told us the Messiah would be sent by God to bring salvation to all mankind. Their knowledge of the scrolls of Moses and the scrolls of Moses, which were taken by our armies when Judea was conquered, told us to seek the star of Jacob and the scepter which would rise out of Israel. Most of our people forgot or ignored these scrolls and the wisdom of Daniel, Belteshazzar, and his friends. Yet, a few of us retained a hope in this prophecy. And that is how we knew to come to Israel. But, you may ask, how did we know when to come? I do not have time now to give you a detailed explanation of Babylonian astrology. Let it suffice that we observed the heavens and we saw the star promised about the king. We understood that the God of heaven was now fulfilling his promise of salvation. The birth of a king demands a royal visit, so we set out on our journey to the land of the Jews. The star disappeared, and we did not see it again until after we had arrived in Jerusalem. Once in the capital city, we began to inquire where the newborn king might be. We were puzzled, for no one seemed to know whom we sought. Had we made this trip for nothing? Then the Jewish ruler, Herod, summoned us to his palace at night. He seemed very interested in our story. He asked us when the star had appeared and sent us to Bethlehem to find the child, instructing us to return with directions so that he too could go and worship. Doubts filled my heart about Herod, for even in our brief visit, I could tell that his people served not out of love, but out of fear. Tyrants are the same in every land. We set out for Bethlehem, and once again, Messiah's star appeared. It led us right to the house where Joseph, Mary, and the young child were living. We knocked, and the door opened. A soft voice beckoning us inward. Strangers, garbed in Babylonian robes, seeking the King of the Jews. I could see the young woman in the room behind, trying to see who was there. In her arms, she held the small boy. Approaching him solemnly, we bowed with our faces to the dust of the earthen floor. In all my years of bowing before kings and governors, I never comprehended until this moment what a bow was for. It was for him, the one of whom we read in the Hebrew scrolls. This child was appointed to the throne of David, sent to make an end of sin. He was the anointed one of God. Before us, in his mother's lap, was the one who would pay the price of redemption. I trembled. Here upon the dust of this world, I bowed before God himself. After presenting our gifts, we listened in wonder as they recounted the story of the birth. We retired for the night, and as we slept, the God of heaven gave us a dream with clear instructions not to return to Herod. Thus, we circled around Jerusalem and left Judea another way. We hid from one king, but sought and found the other. One was to be avoided, the other adored. We worshipped the king to whom the ancient writings pointed and the star of heaven testified. To this king alone, I will raise my voice in adoration.
Amen. Thank you, Nathan. I appreciate that. Does that help? Kind of bring it into a little more of a sense of understanding. I enjoy this story. I enjoyed that reading. Thank you. You know, the story of the wise men, the Magi, it's an interesting story. And I think as I've been researching this more, I could say this: active imaginations have run wild with this story probably more than any other part of the Christmas story. There's just enough information here to make us curious, but not quite enough information to satisfy that curiosity. And oftentimes when that happens, in the lack of information, what do? We kind of write our own narrative. We look for ways to fill in those blanks. And some of that is okay. Active imagination is not a bad thing here. We just have to make sure that we don't dogmatize those things that we may come up with. And some of that's been taking place. I read somewhere that beliefs about the wise men seem to come more from Christmas cards and nativity scenes than they do from the Bible. And there's some truth to that. The lines can blur between fact and fiction. And there's been some pretty elaborate fables concocted to go along with these three wise men. I think it was Vincent in his word studies of the New Testament corroborates that. He said this: many absurd traditions and guesses respecting these visitors have been found their way into popular belief and even into Christian art. They were said to be kings. They were said to be three in number. They were said to be representatives of the three families of Shem and Ham and Japheth. One a king from India, one from Greece, and one from Africa. That's why when you see artwork, that one of them is always pictured as a colored person from Ethiopia. Their names are said to be Caspar, Balthazar, and Melchior. And I don't see that in the text. I'm not sure where they get that information, but a lot of these fables have come over time. But it doesn't stop there. There's accounts that detail their later life. There's accounts out there that say they were later baptized by Thomas, the disciple, the doubting disciple of Jesus. And then there's one that even more strange than that. Supposedly, their remains were found in the 4th century, forgotten about for a time, then found again in the 12th century by a Bishop Renald of Cologne in Germany. And he knew, get this, he knew that they were the skulls of the wise men because they had their eyes still in the sockets and the eyes were still fixed in their gaze towards Bethlehem. Now, if that doesn't convince you that this is genuine, then I don't know what else would. I'm not making this up, actually. The skulls are said to be housed in a golden sarcophagus called the Shrine of the Three Kings. And you can still see that shrine on display in that cathedral there in Cologne. They don't open it. You don't see what's inside. But an elaborate, very ornate shrine there of the Three Kings. My point in bringing all this up is there's fact and there's fiction in this story. Let's see if we can separate one from the other a little bit as we go through. And now I'll be the first to admit, I'm probably filling in some blanks here. And I'll try to detail what we see in Scripture versus what we can deduce. We do have the other scriptures to help us with this, and I think they're helpful in several different places. But let's jump into this. Let's read the text, chapter 2 of Matthew, beginning in verse 1. It says, "Now when Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, in the days of Herod the king, behold, there came wise men from the east to Jerusalem, saying, Where is he that is born King of the Jews? We have seen his star in the east, and we are come to worship him. When Herod the king had heard these things, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. And when he had gathered all the chief priests and scribes of the people together, he demanded of them where Christ should be born. And they said unto him, In Bethlehem of Judea, for thus it is written by the prophet, And thou, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, art not least among the princes of Judah, for out of thee shall come a governor that shall rule my people Israel. Then Herod, when he had privately or secretly called the wise men, inquired of them diligently what time the star appeared. And he sent them to Bethlehem and said, Go and search diligently for the young child, and when you have found him, bring me word again, that I may come and worship him also. And if you believe that, we got a bridge I might be able to sell you as well. When they heard the king, they departed. And lo, the star which they saw in the east went before them till it came and stood over where the young child was. And when they saw the star, they rejoiced with exceeding great joy. And then when they were come into the house, they saw the young child with Mary his mother, fell down and worshipped him. And when they had opened their treasures, they presented unto him gifts of gold and frankincense and myrrh. And being warned of God by a dream, they should not return to Herod, they departed into their own country another way. Familiar words. Let's jump into this here this morning. We look first of all at their identity. Who were these wise men? Again, history puts names to them. I don't know that we necessarily have that. From the text, we understand that they were magi. That's the translation of the word here. And really, I think it's an untranslatable word. It would almost be better if they'd have just left it magi in our translation. It would be a little bit more clear. It was a general term in that time period for men that were trained in the magical arts. Magi, magician, you can see the connection there. Simon the sorcerer, later on in the New Testament, that's the same word for sorcerer there, magician. But it was also a specific term used for a caste or a tribe of priests originally in the Median Empire. You think of the Medes and the Persians, we see them coming in history during the time of Daniel. But we also realize that they were an empire well before that. In fact, some would say they date back clear to Abraham there in Ur of the Chaldees, and I don't know that we can verify that for sure. But it's a specific term for that group of people. They're mentioned often in the book of Daniel, even in the book of Esther. They were skilled in astronomy. They were skilled in astrology. So both the scientific element and the superstitious element of those two ideas, they were skilled in that. Probably more considered priests than kings. Often we hear that term king thrown out there, but it was more of a priestly caste that they belonged to rather than a royal caste. Secondly, we see they're from the east, and we're going to say likely from the area of Babylon. These were powerful, high-ranking officials in the days of the Eastern empires. Babylon, Medo-Persia, those empires would have had these men called magi. And they continued to exist even after those empires had kind of faded away, just like the Levites continued to exist even when Jerusalem was conquered. The Jews were conquered, but they still had their priestly men. Interesting, as I was reading through this, that the Magi were the ones that had the authority to approve the next king. You've heard them called kingmakers. And it's interesting, they had the authority, and that the king had to meet two conditions. He had to master the scientific and religious disciplines of the Magi, which one writer said that's the law of the Medes and the Persians, the laws of the Medes and the Persians that we read about there in Daniel. But also he had to be approved and crowned by the Magi. They were the kingmakers. lets your mind run a little bit. This idea of them traveling all the way to Jerusalem and then to Bethlehem to offer their gifts. They didn't make Jesus king, he was born king. And they recognize that even in the way it's worded here in our text. But that's an interesting parallel. I thought that was kind of neat. Nathan brought this out a little bit in the reading. How would Magi from the east know about a king born in Bethlehem? And there's a lot we could say in regards to that. A little bit of history. In your notes, I actually put a date that's incorrect there. 586 was the last time that Babylon came to Judah in that captivity. Daniel would have been taken probably in that first captivity in 605. But Babylon invaded, and they ended up taking Judah into captivity. Daniel was taken during that first time, along with the other nobles, right? And why were they taken? Why were the educated, the powerful ones taken first? Well, to train them and to see if they could bring them into their system of government and use the wisest ones for that. And so that was Daniel and his 3 friends, as well as many others. What does it say about Daniel as he continued to excel there in Babylon? Eventually, he became the master of the magicians. He became the head magi. He was the one that was in charge of all of them. That's an interesting thing to think about. I think he carried that position through the rest of that empire, even the next empire under Darius the Mede as well. But I believe there was instruction that he gave them with the Old Testament scriptures. I think Numbers 24 that Nathan brought out, I think that was part of it. I think they also had his prophecies that we saw later, the prophecy of the 70 weeks, providing a timeline for the birth of this king and the cutting off of this king. So I can't say 100% for sure, but I do believe that these magi were likely descendants of the magi that were instructed by Daniel so many years before. I think that's part of God's plan here. Truth's been passed down from generation to generation. Bottom line is, these magi were looking, they were seeking, and they had to be seeking for a reason. They had to have found out about that somehow. But they were looking, and God providentially provided a sign to corroborate their faith, a star that they saw as they looked from the east. Let's think about the timing here just for a little bit. In the text it says, "Now when Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, in the days of Herod the king, wise men came." And we read that phrase, "when Jesus was born in Bethlehem," and it sounds linear in our translation, like Jesus was born and then they arrived. And the order is right, but the timing doesn't necessarily mean one happened immediately after the other. It's a participle translation, and we could probably word it this way. Now Jesus, having been born in Bethlehem of Judea, in the days of Herod the king, came wise men from the east. It's more qualifying his birth with details. The focus is on the details, not on the timing. And so we can't say from this that immediately there at the stable, there at the manger, the wise men were present. There's a reason that we put the wise men and the camels over here away from the manger scene, because I don't believe they came at that time. I don't believe they were there with the shepherds, even though in our manger scenes they all appear together. It makes for a really nice Christmas card. And it does fill out the nativity scene a little bit more, right? But I don't believe they were there. I don't think we can support that scripturally. But it says, "We have seen his star in the east." And maybe wording it this way will help. "We being in the east have seen his star." If they were looking east to see the star, they would have gone the wrong direction, right? Because they ended up traveling west. So "we being in the east, we have seen his star." And there's a lot of conjecture, a lot has been written about this star and what that was. And I'm not going to delve into this a huge amount this morning. Nathan and I were even talking about that this morning, and there's a lot of thought about this. The word means a star. It can also mean a bright shining in the sky, something that's blazing forth light. It's not like any star that we understand today. What are stars used for today, or even in former days? To find your direction, right? When we're hunting over on the east side and I step out of the tent and we look for the Big Dipper and the North Star, we've navigated by that even when we're over there hunting. We should have GPSs, and we do, but batteries fail. And there's been times we've had to use the stars. They're fixed in their location. That makes a difference. One year we were over there, and I stepped out of the tent and I looked up at the sky, and it's just beautiful over there. The stars are just so close you can almost touch them. And I was looking up at the Big Dipper and just enjoying the beauty, and all of a sudden I saw this line of stars, what I thought were stars, moving across the sky. And that just threw everything I knew about astronomy into a little bit of a tailspin, because stars don't do that. And I've seen satellites go through the sky, but I've never seen this line of them. And so we just kept watching them. And they would go across, and then they'd get to a certain point, and one would disappear. But about the time that one disappeared, another one would come into view over here. And they just kept moving across the sky. And we're like, what in the world is going on? I was thinking, well, is the Lord coming back? I didn't know what was going on. But anyway, we came home and we looked it up later. And you guys probably know what I'm talking about. The Starlink satellites that are launched into space. It was a whole string of those moving across the sky as they were moving into their place of orbit. So it threw me off there for a little bit. Stars don't do that. And so whatever this was, it wasn't a natural star like we understand stars today. Personally, I believe that it was something that God just created. I believe it was something that was supernatural. But he created that star for this express purpose. That's my thought. There's lots of different perspectives, and I don't know that I can support one more than the other. But the bottom line is, these magi saw something brilliant, something shining there in the sky, and they associated it with the birth of Jesus Christ. And on that information, they begin making plans for a trip to go worship this king. Let's talk about that trip for a minute. It was a difficult journey, long and arduous, likely following the trade route, the major trade route of that day along the Fertile Crescent, 800 to 1,000 miles, from what I can understand as I'm thinking about that. Is that a daunting thought to you, to get up and drive 800 to 1,000 miles, even in a car? Imagine doing it on horseback with camels, walking a good part of that. Ezra likely traveled a similar route years earlier, and the scriptures there in Ezra chapter 7 say it took them 4 months to cover that journey. Whether they went as fast, I don't know for sure, but that gives us a little bit of an idea. But imagine the preparations necessary for a journey like that. Think about the times you took your family on vacation, and just that idea, how much time and planning and effort went into just getting ready for that. I think about my hunting trips going over. I've got lists that I keep from year to year, and that helps me as I plan. But you don't want to forget something. It's not like they had a Walmart along the way they could just pull off and grab what they needed, right? And so think about what that took. The provisions for food, both for them and for their animals. Provisions for shelter and personal care. Protection from thieves and rogue tribes that may attack them along the line. They didn't just get on their computer and go to hotels.com and book hotels all the way across the route. They couldn't do that. A difficult journey. Friends, this was a sacrifice. This wasn't something they undertook lightly. But to come and worship this king cost them significantly. So we see a difficult journey. Secondly, a logical destination. The star disappeared. They saw the star. They realized who it was that star pointed to. It says here in the passage, we have seen his star. That's past tense. I don't believe that star was something they followed all the way to Jerusalem. I believe they made that connection. They understood it was the Jewish Messiah, and it made sense to go look for a Jewish king where? In the capital city. And so they headed on the way to Jerusalem. But they also came with a worthy purpose. We see that here in these verses. Why did they come? We have come to worship. We've come to worship him. That was the goal for which they came. All the expense, all the planning, all the sacrifice for one purpose and one purpose only. To worship him that is born King of the Jews. To prostrate themselves before him. To pay him homage and obeisance and reverence. And the thought hit me, we too can come to Jesus with no greater purpose than to worship him. I hope you do. I hope you spend time in personal worship. I'm thankful that you gather here with us for corporate worship. And I do know that for some of you, it's a sacrifice. It's tough getting up and getting here in the morning, and I don't take that lightly. I'm thankful for that and for you doing that. But that's our purpose as we come to Jesus as well. Well, we see the trip. We see their arrival. We see them coming into Jerusalem here, and not a lot is mentioned in our text. And maybe I'm letting my imagination run a little bit here as well. But I think there was a spectacle when they came into town. I think there was some pomp and some fanfare. We see the word "behold" there in verse 1. In the days of Herod the king, behold, there came wise men. This word is an interesting word. It's an interjection. And it's an imperative interjection. Look, take a look, see, look over here. And it sets apart what comes next as something unique and significant, something unexpected. Take a look at this. Hey, can you imagine such a thing? And it's referring to these wise men as they're coming into the city of Jerusalem. And it's an interesting thought. We need to get this idea out of our head that the wise men coming was three eccentric old dudes on camels coming into the city. No one's going to notice that, right? But what does it say here as we read the passage? Herod was troubled. All the city was troubled. Folks, it got their attention. Probably mounted on horseback with camels carrying their provisions. This was a tribe of wealthy, powerful dignitaries traveling with an entire entourage. I'm guessing they had servants and attendants. They may well have had a military escort with them because these were powerful individuals. Again, some of that is speculation, but it would not be out of the question at all. The thought that comes to mind, and this is not accurate either, but an Aladdin-like entrance. You've seen the little children's cartoon, right? As they come into the city, the Prince Ali comes into the city, and it's this huge caravan, and all that's going on. I can't say it was quite like that. But whatever it was significant enough to get everybody's attention. The arrival, the spectacle they came with. Secondly, we see in the arrival the question they posed. And this got everybody's attention as well. Where is he that's born King of the Jews? The verb is in the present tense. The idea is they're continually asking that question. I don't know if they split up and everybody went a different direction once they got to town, but they're asking everybody the question over and over, trying to get an answer to the question that they're seeking. Well, as you can imagine, news like this would travel fast, and soon it came to the ears of Herod himself. Hey, there's a powerful delegation from the east. They're out there asking all over town, where's this king that's recently been born, King of the Jews? Now, from what you know of Herod, what we've learned about Herod in previous discussions, you can probably anticipate his response. And it wasn't going to be a pleasant one. But what we see here, first of all, is great agitation. It says in verse 3, when Herod had heard these things, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. Why? Because of the spectacle? Well, possibly. But I think his troubling was more because of their question. You see, Herod was the king of the Jews, right? But it was a title that he obtained by dubious and questionable means. And in reality, he really had no legal right to the throne. He was an Idumean. He was a descendant of Esau, not a descendant of Jacob. And so he was troubled. The word means agitated. Have you ever been just worked up, like totally worked up in your spirit? I think we can all identify with that. Like a washing machine agitator, just keeps going back and forth, right? Great inward commotion. He was stressed, he was anxious, he was distressed. And the thought hit me as I was reading through this. The news of the Messiah brought great joy to everybody that heard it, that believed. We've seen this throughout the whole story, haven't we? And yet it struck fear and dread in the heart of this paranoid king. The news of the Messiah, what does it bring to your heart? I hope it brings joy, just like it did for so many that we have looked at. But the verse goes on, it says that all Jerusalem was troubled with him. As I was thinking that through, I think likely the troubling of the Jews was more from the potential response of Herod. What's Herod going to do? How's he going to react to this news? They knew full well what he was capable of when he felt a rivalry to the throne, and we don't have to go through that whole story again of what he did to his relatives even, and how many he put to death. What we see as we move on in the story, a feigned agreement, a deceptive action that's brought on by Herod. We see there in verse 4, he gathers the chief priests together, and then later on, down there in verse 7, he has a secret meeting with the wise men. So we see this hurried assembly. The Magi's question has him scrambling for answers, and so he assembles his own wise men. He gathers them together, as many as he could find on short notice. High priests is plural. We might talk a little bit more about that tonight. It's an interesting thought. But he gathers the scribes, those that would know the scriptures, together. And there's some urgency here. It says he demands of them. And that word does mean to ask or inquire, but it's in the imperfect tense here, which indicates a continuous, relentless asking of that question. He demanded of them. He needed an answer, and he wanted that answer right away. He didn't want to wait for it. Well, I think these scribes and high priests were probably a little nervous when they suddenly were called by Herod into the court and gathered together. I think there was some fear had struck in their hearts. But when they heard the question, they're like, whew, sigh of relief. We know the answer to that one. We don't even need to look that one up. We know exactly where he's going to be born. And they quoted Micah chapter 5, verse 2. He'll be born in Bethlehem of Judea. So Herod gets that information, and he begins to plot his next move. So we go from a hurried assembly to a secretive meeting. He calls these wise men together privately or secretly, lest his deceit be uncovered. And it says he inquires of them diligently. He makes a thorough and precise investigation. The idea here is he's looking for exact information rather than a diligent search. Diligence was part of it, but it's the details that he's looking for. He wants to learn from them the exact time that star appeared. Why does he want that information? That's for plan B, in case plan A doesn't work out. He's thinking ahead. He's playing chess here is what he's doing. So he called them privately. He inquires of them diligently. Third, he commands them officially. He gives them an order. The word search is in the imperative mode. Here's this king commanding these magi to go and obey him, which is interesting. He has a little bigger perspective of who he thinks he is. But go to Bethlehem. You go, you search diligently, and then you come back and you tell me where he was, because I want to go and worship him as well. I think the thought here is I've done something for you, now you return the favor, and you do something for me. And the fourth thought I've already mentioned, he plots deceptively, he's hiding his true intentions. I too want to worship him. And we know that he had no intentions of going to worship. I don't think the wise men were overly intimidated by Herod. I think this show of bravado was just that, and I think they saw through it to some degree. They understood the politics of the realm. I think they knew that he was a figurehead king. But I also think they were glad to be out of his presence and glad to be on their way to Bethlehem, getting out of there as soon as they could. This would be a relatively short 6-mile trip, especially compared to the 800 to 1,000 miles they'd already covered. This is just a little jaunt. 6 miles, that's nothing. Let's go. And they took off to go there. And as they go, the star appears again. It's an amazing thing. Down in verse 9, when they had heard the king, they departed, and lo, behold, there's that interjection again. This amazing thing happened. The star which they saw in the east went before them till it came and stood over the place where the young child was. Now we see reverent worship. As they come to this king, we see it in breaking down in 3 ways. There's anticipation, the joy, and the rejoicing. Matthew can't make it any more clear. There's joy, there's rejoicing, there's exceeding great joy, right? He brings that out very clearly here. I think they knew they were close. Can you imagine the growing anticipation? I mean, they'd put a lot of effort into this. And now they were getting close. They knew that just in a short period of time, they would see this one. So there's anticipation, there's culmination. They come into the house and they see with their own eyes this one that they had come to worship. The young child is there with Mary, his mother. It's interesting, in every one of these verses that it talks about Mary and Jesus, the child is mentioned first. Interesting thought. You can run with that on your own. We might talk about that a little bit more tonight as well, but that's interesting to me. The prophecy relayed by Herod had pointed them in the right direction. The star above the house left no doubt. This is the place. Inside is the king. And I just want you to think for a moment about the emotions that they must have been feeling at that moment. We don't worship out of emotion, but emotion is a real part of worship, isn't it? As we understand who Jesus is and what he's done for us. But for them, all the planning and all the expense and all the sacrifice, all that they had endured on that long trip of at least 4 months, maybe even longer, all of that became trivial at the sight of this one who was born King of the Jews. They'd waited, and now they're able to worship. Imagine what that must have felt like as that worship came pouring out. I don't know about you, but waiting always sweetens the enjoyment, doesn't it? We understand that. We kind of teach that with our kids. How many of you guys, the kids were begging to open presents earlier? They wanted to find out what was in those packages, but you let them wait and you drag that out a little bit. And maybe you even got some work out of them that morning before you let them open it. That's not a bad thing either. But they'd waited a long time. And that anticipation and culmination now turns to adoration as they worshiped him. They worshiped him with reverence. What else could they do? Here are these powerful kings, these powerful men, these priests, dressed in their finest royal apparel, one by one entering the home and falling on their knees and touching their forehead to the ground before this one, born King of the Jews. Must have been quite a scene. How long that took, I don't know. Again, I think there's more than 3 wise men here, and I think they all took their turn going in and reverently observing and worshiping this child. It says they worshiped him with reverence. Secondly, they honored him with gifts. It says they opened their treasures. That word is a treasury, is what the idea is. And I think the thought behind this is an ornate box in which valuable treasures were kept. They had these gifts, and I think they had them in an ornate box that they brought with them, carried all the way from Babylon area. And they opened that box and pulled out these incredible gifts that they wanted to present to him. It's the traditional way they would honor a king in their culture. They gave valuable gifts, gifts of gold and frankincense and myrrh. They gave practical gifts. Why would God have them bring gifts to honor Jesus Christ at that point? Well, what's about to happen? They're just about to have to take a trip, an emergency trip that Joseph and Mary know nothing about. They have to go down to Egypt. Do you think that possibly these gifts helped sustain them and support them during that time when they made that trip to Egypt, and then as they were traveling back to Nazareth and as he was setting up his wood shop again? Likely that was the case. Valuable gifts, but practical gifts as well. The story's not quite done. We see divine intervention here at the very end. How long they stayed there with Mary and the child? Did they stay long enough for Joseph to come back and interact with him as well? Those are details we're not given. We don't know. But we see them retiring for the night. The mission's complete. They know they've got a long trip back. I think by what I read here, they're planning to go back through Jerusalem and talk to Herod again. That's the implication. But there's a midnight dream. God interrupts their sleep. They'd been guided by a star. They'd been directed by prophecy. And now they're warned by God directly, hey, don't go back to Herod. And so there was a quick adjustment. That morning, they recalibrated their GPSs, right? Recalculating. They went home a different way. They went back a different route. And they headed back a different way than the way that they had come. God divinely intervening, and we're not going to get into the rest of the story of the trip to Egypt. Our focus is on the Magi here this morning. Let me give you a few takeaways as we wrap this up. It's a good story. We need to understand that, but it's got to be applied to our hearts as well. A couple thoughts. Number one, Jesus came as a Savior, not just for the Jew, but also for the Gentile. Aren't you thankful for that? Every individual that we've looked at in the Christmas story to this point has been Jewish in origin. But here these wise men, these magi from the east, that Daniel likely would have interacted with, their forefathers. God revealed the Christ child to them, and that reminds us that we as Gentiles can come to Jesus too. Salvation is open to everyone. And I think the wise men here in this story help teach us that. Number two, God will guide those who are disposed to find him. These wise men were looking, and God revealed to them the star. I think it's a reminder for us as well. If we're hungry and we're seeking after God, we'll find him. Jeremiah 29 verse 12 says, if you seek, you will find if you seek with all your heart. Proverbs chapter 2 brings that idea. We're to search for him as for hid treasure, for silver and for gold. And when we do, we are promised that we will find him. Matthew 5 brings out a similar idea. We're to hunger and thirst after righteousness. And when we do, we will be filled. Right? And so God guides those. He allows himself to be found by those who are disposed to seek him. I trust that we are seeking him today, as the wise men were in that day. Number three, the pursuit of Christ brings joy. The pursuit of Christ brings joy. We've seen it through the entire story. We see it again here. Do we have joy in our lives? The joy comes from our seeking of Christ, our pursuit of him, our worship and adoration of him. That's where the joy comes from. Number four, worship is expressed through giving. Worship and giving are almost synonymous ideas here. We can't worship without giving. We can't give without worship. I guess we can, but it doesn't work that way. These wise men gave gifts, and we too express our worship through what we give to our Lord as well. What do we give? We talked about that last week, didn't we? The good and perfect gifts that God gives to us, the gifts that we can give back to him. We give him our hearts, we give him our devotion, we give him our time, we give him our talents, we give him the gift of our presence. Remember that last week? But then one final thought here, number 5, and that is this: the news of Jesus Christ elicits a variety of responses in people, doesn't it? We see 3 of those different responses here in this passage. Sometimes we talk to people about Christ and they respond with hostility. right? They don't take what we have to say. They don't want to hear it. There's some antagonism. And we see that with Herod here in the story. And like Herod, some will respond with antagonism. They'll reject him. And if we're the ones that are bringing the message, they may reject us as well. And we have to understand going in that that's one of the responses to the story of Jesus Christ. Secondly, we see indifference. And I see this in the Jerusalem Jews. We see some apathy here. They just chose to ignore this news. And in my mind, that's even after Anna had gone through and proclaimed that this is the Christ, this is the Messiah. Some speculate even door to door through Jerusalem proclaiming that news. It boggles my mind that the wise men made the trip from Jerusalem to Bethlehem and they didn't have a huge escort of people going with them, wanting to see this Messiah, wanting to find who he was. Now, I get the fact that fear of Herod probably played a part in this. And I think it does with a lot of people as well. There's a fear associated with coming to Christ. What am I going to have to give up? What's going to change in my life? What does this mean for me if I make this choice? But I wonder if some of it was just busyness as well, wrapped up in the cares of the day and in their own lives that they had no time for a Savior. Oh, may we not have this attitude of indifference towards Jesus Christ. May we respond the third way like the wise men did with worship. We see hostility, we see indifference, we see worship. And folks, that's where we need to be. Like the Magi, may we too respond with reverence. May we come and adore him, this one who came to save us from our sins. That's the response that God would desire of us. Worship and adoration. Father, I thank you.